Yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we're all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you're there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss, so let's jump right in. I'm thrilled to be joined by Santis, an independent organizational behavior practitioner, speaker, podcaster, and author with over 35 years of experience working with clients in professional services firms, both domestically and internationally. And we're going to talk about a lot of things, but in particular, I'm very excited to talk to him about his new book. It just came out in May. It's called Why I Find You Irritating, Navigating Generational Friction at Work. Santis, welcome to Get Down to Business.
My gosh, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure. So I've been reading a little bit from your book, and I know that you quote Orwell, who said that each generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it and wiser than one that comes after it. So this thing about generational change in the workplace. Chris, how did you get so interested in it?
Well, it's interesting because about 18 years ago, I was running consulting schools for a very large firm. And at the time, I had these 300 young people that come in across the country, and I'd spend 3 weeks with them. And I started to notice that they were engaging us differently than I had expected them to engage. In terms of they were more assertive, I felt more demanding. There were a lot of qualities that I found irritating, as it were. And then I started to do homework. And so over the last 18 years, I've been talking to people about it. I've been reading about it. And then what you have now is the compilation of that in my book.
That's awesome. It's fantastic. And it's a great read, and certainly encourage all of our listeners to find it. It's called Why I Find You Irritating, Navigating Generational Friction at Work. We'll certainly link to it in a little bit on the program. So why is this book different from others that are on the topic? You are certainly not the first person to write about this important issue.
Yes, I found that I was trying to find a space that wasn't addressed. And one of the things I look at is what was happening in the country in terms of how we transitioned from a company man experience into a transactional marketplace. How does that play in? I also look at parenting models over the last 60 years, and how does the parenting model shift? And what are the repercussions of being raised differently than the generation that preceded you? And then lastly, I looked at the idea of perception and stereotype and generalization, because I think there's a perceptual issue here that is also taken into account in the sense that when the press starts to say things about the young, we start to believe that must be true of all the young, and it is not necessarily reflective of any of the young, but maybe a segment or two.
Sure, absolutely. So it's common when we're talking about generations, we talk about the Gen Y, Gen X, and so on. And certainly I've had many conversations on this program about the differences of work ethic and work philosophy and so on. But you talk in the book about something really, really important, and that is stages of life. So what is the distinction between those two areas, stages of life and generational differences?
Yes, because this, again, as I speak on this, the generational lens is how you see the world, meaning how do you interpret events? Imagine it as a pair of eyeglasses that you put on that are the consequences of how you were raised. You see through those lenses in a way that is unique to who you are and your experiences. Stages of life is what everyone goes through, as there are 6: a child, a young adult, an emerging adult, an elder, and bonus elderhood. Those stages of life are common to all humanity, but it's how you interpret the events in each of those stages of life that make you, and also makes you judge others through that lens.
Interesting. So you talk in the book, again, it's called Why I Find You Irritating, Navigating Generational Friction at Work. We're chatting with the author, Santis, and you talk about feedback and performance appraisals in your book, and you say very, very clearly you don't like them. Why is that?
No, I find feedback is critical to succeeding. It's critical to succeeding. I think and I appreciate the notion. I don't think we do it well. I think we do it in the negative sense in terms of correction, not just correction. And I think we should be holistic and not just correcting people, but recognizing what they do well so that they repeat those behaviors. Now, as it relates to performance appraisals, I think they're awful. I think they're performance opinions, because they are not based on the data, but rather my opinion of me. And this goes back to the generational lens. When I see you doing something differently than I would, I mark that down. For instance, let me give you a quick example. Yeah, I come from a place of, as a young boomer, I was very obedient to authority. So if I was to receive some feedback, I'd sort of just take it in. Now, a young person today might receive that same feedback and they'll challenge. They'll say, why are you saying that? What did you mean by that? I don't understand that. Now, we hear that challenge as an affront, as opposed to an inquiry to learn more about what I can do differently. We might mark them down for that. But the idea of the performance appraisal is another piece of it, which I find quite annoying. It commoditizes us, in the sense that we look at 10 or 12 variables that may or may not be relevant to the actual work we're doing, and yet we are judged on those things. So you're getting opinions, and you're skewing some of that towards things I'm not even doing, and nor should I be concentrating on doing those things. Our greatness is really around a few things we need to do very well.
Mm-hmm. I'm chatting with Chris DeSantis, and Chris, I know you're a speaker, podcaster, and author. You've been working with clients for over 35 years, but over the past 15 years, I know you've been speaking on generational issues in the workplace at hundreds of the leading U.S. law and accounting firms, as well as many of the major insurance and pharma companies. So it's interesting that we're having this conversation towards the latter half of 2022. Mm-hmm. How have you seen change? I mean, especially in this new hybrid workplace, what is it doing that's different than previous generations?
Well, I think the pandemic it's sort of moved us into the future, meaning that the pandemic has caused us to accept the reality that remote work works. Now, what you've done now is you've accepted, or actually the young now expect greater flexibility. We lived in a time as a boomer or as a Gen Xer, they didn't live in a time that sort of embraced this notion of flexibility. So I think we're going to have to re-examine how we design our work, and I think we have to engage the young, because they are going to be the people that actually execute against that model. But we have to realize that we are social creatures. You see, this is where it gets messy. The boomers want us to be back in the office to a great degree because that's where we socialize, that's where we had our successes. Whereas the young want greater flexibility, and they're not necessarily resisting going back to the office entirely, but they want some space in the middle. So I think we're going to have to find some area of agreement, that's where we are in flux. And that's where I see happening right now.
Definitely. And Chris, it's funny, as we're having this conversation, as we're recording, just minutes ago, I had a conversation about mentorship with my mentor, and we were talking about some of the experiences that I've had in mentoring others as well. Now, I know you're so passionate about it. So how has mentorship and mentoring changed over the years, and why are the young so bent on it?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a great question, because I devote a chapter to this. I come from the space of the mentor chooses you, and it's an organic relationship, and you don't describe the mentor in advance of having them. You describe it as a consequence of having been mentored. Now we've gone into a space where we now assign mentors in advance. The problem I have with that is I have no problem with assigning relationship. I have a problem with naming it as a mentor, because it implies intimacy where none is earned. And this, of course, makes both parties slightly anxious. Now, why do the young want this? Well, they want to have, according to the Gallup poll, they want to have somebody in the workplace who cares about them, who's interested in their future, who's interested in their development. This is a consequence, again, of their parental model. Their parental model had high engagement by the parents. They just want to bring that kind of sense of being engaged into the workplace.
Definitely. Again, I've been chatting with Chris DeSantis, and certainly enjoyed our conversation, which is just a taste of what's in his new book, Why I Find You Irritating: Navigating Generational Friction at Work. I know it just came out in May, and it's already gotten some great accolades, and it certainly has a lot of very practical, actionable guidance that every company, big or small, can use both in life and in the workplace. So Chris, perhaps the best homework that we could leave people with is how people can pick up a copy of the book and get in touch with you. Can you share that website and contact information with our listeners?
Yes, and thank you for allowing me to do so. My website is my name, cpdesantis.com. That's one way to access me and learn a little bit what I do. The book itself is available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or the Books A Million. So any of those websites, you can get a copy of the book.
Fantastic. Chris DeSantis, and I know the website again is cpdesantis.com. Again, the book is called Why I Find You Irritating, Navigating Generational Friction at Work. And Chris, I certainly look forward to having you back on real soon. Continue this conversation, certainly an important topic, and it continues to evolve as we continue on in 2022. So we've got to squeeze in a very quick break. We're going to continue our conversation all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship when we return in just a moment. Check out my website, shalomklein.com, and be sure to check out Get Down to Business on your favorite podcast app. Subscribe, rate, review, and share. It makes it even easier for others to find the show. Again, don't touch that dial because we are coming right back. More small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship when we return in just a moment.